Minister's Questions Review, and this week it is the usual suspects, all present and correct. Alex Grant, Phil Attridge, myself, Stuart Lochhead, and Norman Stewart. Hi there. Well then guys, let's start with Norrie today. What did you think about today's overall impression of today's FMQs?
Well, Joanne's first question was basically how much money did you spend on the Ryder Cup gig to Alex Salmond. It was too small. It was personalising it, which, okay, that's a tactic they're using. But she didn't really succeed in getting it across. Alex batted it away by saying 100 million in jobs. But she just kept on with it. And it was like, well, what? I'm sorry, £54,000 for 17 people for a week.
I bet you had a second cup of coffee, I seen you.
At a gig like that, I'm sorry.
The Ryder Cup is an expensive gig.
Well, I mean, it wasn't just the Ryder Cup, it was a week in Chicago encompassing the Ryder Cup and some oil meeting, some meeting with the big oil companies. And it's like, I'm sorry, where do you come from, honey? Where did you expect him to go? Go and live in a bed and breakfast for a week?
Bear in mind her soundbite will be what appears in the press.
But what does she expect?
But she's personalised it. And that's what the supine Scottish media will repeat it.
The First Minister of Scotland has a meeting with some big hitter from God knows where, from an oil company. What does he do? Follow up and say, well look, I'm in a bed and breakfast, so I'll meet you in Starbucks on the corner.
Well, just imagine if it had been her as First Minister, she'd have taken a caravan with her and stayed in the caravan.
The point you made, pinstripe kilt man.
Well, the black kilt with the blouse and
Jack McConnell as First Minister.
And then she turns around and says something about paying £250 for a pair of trews because you forgot his tartan trews.
Yeah, well, none of that matters. I mean,
I'm sorry, if some Scottish designer made a pair of trews for him and he could stand up and say, oh, these were made by Jimmy Smith, top Scottish designer, great tartan, blah blah blah, and that Scottish designer makes, who knows, £50,000 in orders.
Tweed is the thing now with haute couture. Tweed is the thing.
Well, but, I mean, is she really that stupid? Is she really that stupid?
Well, I think
no, she's pathetic.
No, let's be a bit careful here, guys. I mean, you know, I agree with everything you say. However, I think you've got to critique what goes on in there in the context of how it then gets, as Stuart said a minute ago, how it then gets translated out into the street. All she's trying to do, and it's to me the most important indication is she's got nothing better to talk about. The Daily Telegraph, that well-known organ supporting the socialists, have obviously decided, right, they spent nearly 600k on the Ryder Cup, let's find out what it is, freedom of information. They've got the answer from Visit Scotland for how they spent their bit of the money, but they've managed to identify that the bit that hasn't been identified, which they're putting to his account, is £50,000, and he's failed to explain it so far. So it's an ad hominem attack. It's typical because it will go down well as a headline. Cockers will be sitting up there in the gallery, and he'll be writing tomorrow, First Minister wasting taxpayers' money.
Alex, the last time you were in the air industry, what does it cost for a return flight from Scotland to America?
Well, business class would be several grand. I mean,
Right.
17 of them, by the way.
Yeah, but they all travel business class.
You're talking £3,000 a head for 17.
Right, so just say it's £1,000
well, that's 51.
in airfares. So that's 17,000.
Right? Speaking.
Yeah.
So I've sat there and worked it out. It cost them to be there. Right? Sorry, I need to work out.
Well, 17, no, it's £3 grand.
It cost them under £300 for flights and hotels.
No, that's 3,000.
3,000.
No, 300.
No, 3,000. 17
Wait a
people.
minute. For 300 a day it cost them.
Oh,
okay. Right.
For the top end expenses.
Which is.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but Norrie, as I've said to you before.
You get that for sitting in the.
I know, but as I've said to you before, and I'll say it again.
For 20 minutes.
The challenge with that, if you don't answer it, you've got something to hide, and he didn't answer it. He said the effort of going to the Ryder Cup was an investment in Scotland, which you lot never talk about. Good response up to a point. But if the £54,000 can be expressed in terms of the sort you've just alluded to, why isn't he doing it? It would have pulled
Well,
the rug from
Well,
under.
he kind of did, because he repeated it when he said there was that 50-odd thousand pounds that apparently is not accounted
Yeah, but he hasn't
for.
answered
Was
the
for
question.
70. It was for 70. It
Yeah,
covered
he
for
didn't
17
answer the
people.
he hasn't answered the FOI question, and it all, when you do that, you've got something to hide.
Well, actually, right, to sit there and go to the music, I mean, sorry, she was pathetic. She's acting like this whole, because they're probably scared, you see, that some of their voters are likely looking to vote for them. So, you know, as you said, £300. I'm sorry, I go to Cuba, I'll probably spend about £200 a day while I'm there. And Cuba's dirt cheap. I mean, he's in Chicago. So he's meant to go down. Well, I went along there and I had my breakfast there, and I'll tell you what I had for my breakfast.
that's
I mean,
what I would do.
it's beneath contempt that you should have to do that.
No, I don't agree with you. He needs to say, that was 17 people, £300 a day. Have you ever tried to take a delegation to a location like that?
Yeah, but why did you have
obviously
the lunch? That's what she'd have done. She's mean and petty.
Yeah, but she wouldn't have got in it. She wouldn't have got to that.
Ridiculous frippery is what he said at the
Anyway,
end.
that's
which
the-
kind of-
that is the-
yeah,
perhaps that is the point. I think he was in the end he was angry.
ridiculous frippery.
Which is why he called it ridiculous frippery.
I mean,
Which was a good answer.
could you imagine that if it was the First Minister going abroad? What we should be doing? Taking everything in a carrier bag, you know?
Well, what I'd love to see him do is go to France and stay in a B&B. Because they'd be complaining about that.
Look, it
It's
made
an
us look
insult
stupid.
to Scotland.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
No.
kind of would.
And how much did McConnell, do you ever think, spent when he was poncing about all
Well,
over the place?
Yeah, but if
and
that,
Tony Blair.
however, if that's the case, he knew the question was coming up. He's had a freedom of information. No, he said, well, he's had a freedom of information request and he hasn't answered it.
Yeah, well, he didn't know that was correct.
Well, he may not have done, but the fact is, if you are delaying answering a freedom of information request, you know it's going to come and bite you at some point. You should be prepared to benchmark the expenditure against what other people have done and say, it's what heads of state do. You obviously don't understand that. Piss off.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move to Phil here. Now, Phil, do you want to run through each of the leaders and?
Well, yeah, Ruth Davis. Well, I mean, it was really something about nothing that she was going on about. Not actually
Student
looking at
numbers.
figures. Student numbers.
Repeating an old lie.
Yeah,
you
well,
did say.
the original, what she was going on was this whole idea of the amount of courses and the amount of courses that have dropped. But some of the courses are a couple of hours a week, as he's explained on more than one occasion. But he's talking about full-time courses. So the actual hours in further education in colleges has increased quite dramatically.
You've got to think she did well in as much as.
Yeah, but
she pointed out it was actually about women. He didn't. In his first answer, he didn't.
yeah, but then
didn't
again,
answer that.
yeah, but she only picks up because he has answered it before, and he did answer it with
Yeah,
the 60
to
odd.
be fair though, in his preliminary answer, I actually think, although he didn't literally, explicitly say, let's put the women bit to one side for a moment, I
Yeah.
want to answer the basic premise of your question. He did say, the first thing I want to do is answer this basic premise of your
Yeah.
question. But as in any debate, it gives her the opportunity to do as she does. You see, you want to ignore the women, which he didn't.
No,
So
but
but-
because there's two questions, you never want to answer the question fully the first time.
No, you don't.
Which
You
is what he
don't.
does with Lamont.
But he did, and whatever they did with those figures, they can play about with them. It's not the only one. They've all been at it. Kezia was at it there the other week about the
Yeah,
amount
but-
of courses,
but
and the hours.
it's
But the hours have increased, and if there's more women that have gone into full-time education, it would be common sense, and just you would take it for granted that some of those women, that 60-odd thousand that have gone into full-time employment, have benefited from
Yeah.
college courses.
Okay,
But figures don't lie, they say. But then we go on to the next person.
All right, Willie.
But basically, she's always what she wants. Ruth.
All right, all right.
She's just a
Tell
lying
us what you
Tory
think about
get.
Willie's.
Willie was actually,
Stop and search.
yeah, he was quite. I mean, I'm quite worried about this. I mean, there was over a third of a million between April and the end of last year of car stops and searches. There's been around 500,000 people just getting stopped, basically. On the street, and for no good reason. You're meant to have a good reason. Just because you don't like the look of somebody and you happen to be wearing a black uniform.
Sorry, how do you know they had no good reason?
I'm sorry, 750,000
How do
people.
you know they had no good reason?
Well, of course they had. I mean, they probably had 2 legs in the head. That's enough reason for
No,
most
wait a
people.
minute, Phil. No, you're saying they had no good reason. How do you know they had?
They were walking around in the evening as you. But then again,
Because
I'm-
they're the police.
yeah. What's his
fact
name?
that- the fact
Kenny and Alex Stormtroopers. That's what it appears to be. What they're going
What
for
it
is
appears to be and what it is are two different things.
Yeah.
They have to report every stop and search.
Yeah, well, but it wasn't answered like that.
But the
Well,
question is
no,
4
no.
times as many stop and search
As
in a
in
year.
London. As
no,
in
no,
London.
but that may be a different statistic, but he didn't say that. He said 4 times as many as the previous year. How do you account for that? This is extremely worrying. The only legitimate answer to that is, I can assure you that with the consolidation of the Scottish police into one unit, we now have the ability to do what we would have liked to have done before, and that level of stop and search is fully justified by a regulated methodology that says every time they do it, they have to justify why they've done it. And unless you've looked at that and you can tell me that some of that stop and search is random persecution,
Can I
Yeah, but just a minute.
Can I finish what I was saying? No, I haven't finished it.
Yeah, okay. But
No,
look,
'cause you haven't let me finish.
it's got to be a policy decision to go from one level to quadruple it in a year.
well, I just said there was.
And that should have been justified.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
no,
I was going to deal with that
All right.
before I was rudely
Right.
interrupted.
Right, Phil? Come on.
That was my initial response. It's the police. They're at it. They can't justify that. And then it was something Willie said when he says, "But 80% of these people, were no reason to stop them." So I thought that leaves 20%, or 750,000. That's 150,000 positives, which means I'm thinking about it again, because that is. If you've stopped 750,000 and 150,000 of them have been positive stops for one reason or another, then that kind of gives a bit of a reason why, or a bit of a. It does.
No,
150,000 is positive stops for some reason.
It doesn't.
The other stat that came out was, right,
A lot of bloody people carrying
80%
or
there was
whatever.
no result. Right, there was no result in 80%, but 70% of them, according to Salmond, they agreed to it. Yeah, you want to stop search me, fine, I'm cool with that.
Well, that's another issue, of course.
So 10% of people were innocent and pissed off with it.
Well, yeah, then it did. Well, that's fine. If you say that the vast majority of those stopped felt that it was reasonable for the police to stop them, when in fact the police found them in no way breaking any law of any sort, I didn't believe it. Because it's very easy to say we didn't get a complaint from 70%. I have to disagree with you totally. If all you get is a 20% success rate out of a 4 times increase in stop and search, that is a problem.
Yeah, I'd like to see a bit more of a report. I didn't say it totally, but I mean, I'm starting to have a look at, there's always...
Well, look,
sorry,
content-
you're not living in the real world.
Well, come on then, guys. We're just arguing. We've got different
You're
opinions.
not arguing amongst each other.
No,
So just
you
a-
get a blade pulled on you once. You want everybody in the street stopped every time they walk out their door.
Well, I'm sorry, you can't run a country like saying because
Well, you can't.
somebody presented a knife in front of me once, everybody down that street should be stopped every time they
Well,
walk out
my
the door.
experience is a lot more than once.
But that's not the point. If his allusion to knife crime, I think, was helpful in that respect, and it may be, and I don't think he did it forcefully enough or explained it properly, in my opinion. If it is true that the majority of that increase has been focused on knife crime, the consequences of which are self-evident in terms of the numbers of people who've been arrested for knife crime, QED. I do think. If it's 4 times, and she didn't say this, if it is 4 times what's happening in London, then you've
No,
got to
there's no
ask
mention
yourself.
of London.
No, I know
No,
that
that didn't. No, but I'd read that this week.
But Phil says he'd read that this week. What I'm saying is, if the incidence of stop and search is so great by comparison to London, I have to say, as an ordinary bloke who hasn't been challenged with somebody with a knife, I admit, and doesn't live in a rough area, I admit.
I do, and I've never been challenged with it.
Well, that's fine. I do think it does merit questioning. And of all of the things that were talked about today, Willie Rennie, much as I dislike the bloke, that was a good question.
I think
I think all the rest
It
of
was a
it.
good question.
Willie was very good.
And it is anyway, let's move on, gentlemen, because it is an issue that we don't agree on, but it's only one topic.
It's all right, we'll change under independence.
The Pentland Firth.
I thought that was very good, and I thought
This is an interesting development that's been happening. We had actually 3 backbenchers on 1, 2, 3 on the same subject.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it was Jim Eady, who's a SNP,
Yeah.
Ian Graham.
MSP. Then we got Ian Gray.
Kicking it.
Then we got, what was it, just Ian
No,
Gray?
it was just 2. It was just
Just
2.
the 2 of them. But they seem to, presiding officer seems to have got seem to be able to link these things together. You know, you can have, instead of just one question, two answers.
Well, I don't think she's linking it together. Surely it's randomised what the opposition want to ask. I mean, the point here is that Jimmy D gave the FM the opportunity to boast about a success, and the first thing the Labour Party did was take an opportunity to kick him in the groin. Because you're exaggerating, because they want it to be that way. You cannot. The idea that there's a putative development in Scotland which would supply half of Scotland's electricity needs is absolutely fantastic. Oh bloody hell! We better put Mr. Miserable Face up to say, you're exaggerating because it's not that good.
And he got his facts wrong as well.
And Salmon gave him a kicking on.
He did, yeah, I agree.
Sarah Boyack got a better response, but then she's fairly level-headed normally, isn't she, Sarah?
Yeah, and that was a reasonable question. It was given a reasonable answer, and nobody was actually. Yeah, she might have been trying to score a point.
No, she responded to it. She responded to his.
It was
question.
informative.
I
learned something.
As we've discussed that before on that particular subject, one of the major opportunities for the SNP to actually sell itself and independence better is equally one of the major opportunities for the opposition to kick him in the groin. You are a centralising government and there is no evidence that you're going to do anything else. And that leaves a lot of people in the population with the view that, well, they're no different from Westminster. What the SNP ought to be doing when it comes to that land reform bill is being radical, because none of the people that they could benefit are likely to be on the no side. The people who are going to object to the land reform bill, as we saw potentially on the BBC programme last week, are the big landowners who are all bloody Tories.
Yeah, but really, Sarah Boyack's point was,
or non-domicile.
was town centres.
Well, yeah, but it was about
it
was about local devolution. That's what the point is.
No,
it's a big thesis in the Labour Party. I was at a COSLA meeting last week where they were talking about local democracy, which ostensibly was actually a very positive discussion. But the cynics would tell you that actually it's the Labour Party within COSLA who are actually trying to say what we need is more local democracy, not independence, and we want power taken away from Holyrood because that suits their agenda. So Sarah Boyack did a very equitable job in asking the question, but that's where they're coming from.
Oh, that's what's going to. That'll be the extra devolution. I've said that straight to the beginning.
Absolutely, absolutely
yeah,
right.
That'll be
The Fiona MacLeod question was very good.
Yeah, I like the way he kind of whacked it straight, because the four of us were sitting there waiting for him to bat it and turn around straight across to Joanne after her other last disastrous speech last night, where she was actually agreeing with Boris Johnson.
I think he could have done more on that though, because your line about him agreeing with Boris Johnson, I wish her agreeing with Boris Johnson, I wish he had said that. Yeah. Joanne Lamont is now a pal of the Tories, namely Boris Johnson. Well, she should spend a pound on
Joanne Lamont got a kicking off with
He's not as pathetic as they are.
I've been wondering why Salmon doesn't just get stuck in the Labour Party.
He probably will.
He wants Labour Party, Labour voters.
Last few months, he won't do it now.
There's nothing worse than saying to somebody, "You're stupid. You voted for the Labour Party."
Exactly. It's a very.
But
what you could have said, Norrie, is quite simple. You could have said, "I'm amazed. I'm honestly amazed that the leader of the Labour Party in Scotland could stand up and say that the most important thing for Scotland was the success of London. Do you think Labour Party supporters actually believe that's good?
Oh, no.
I think the Labour Party leadership should go and talk to its people. You know, you don't attack the Labour Party, you attack the Labour leadership, but it's very difficult. You're absolutely right, it's very difficult.
Well, look, believe it or not.
Oh, but one last one now?
Yeah, well.
Did you hear that resounding slap?
Jackie
Bailey, when she sat down.
Wasn't it? Yeah, I know.
Should be a whoopee cushion button from the presiding officer.
I tell you what, I would ask one interesting question. Do you actually believe Jackie Bailey, the way she is, the way she sounds, the way she behaves, actually appeals to the average Glasgow Labour voter? I can't see it.
Obviously, but then there is that old saying, you know, stick a donkey up with a red blanket.
I would imagine if she, I'd rather have her in my corner than out.
Oh, she's not daft,
I
but
think she could be a feisty representative.
I agree.
But she keeps doing the same thing. She keeps getting it wrong.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because she lies all the time, and as we discussed at the start of this conversation, it's how it's represented.
Well, I've just drawn her as a Cheshire cat.
Well, she's always got that smile. It's always, you know, Mind kids, when just before they start screaming, you've got that rector smile because they've got wind. That's what she looks like. She looks like she has permanent wind. She has that super silly.
I forgot what
smear
the
in
question
her
was.
face.
What was the question again?
Inequality.
Inequality, yeah.
Oh, right. That was an interesting report. I don't know if you read it all.
No.
But it was quite good.
Stirling University report.
Basically, it said you can't just use tax
Yeah.
to equalise society, and the Scottish Government effectively does not have the powers to do it. It needs.
Yeah, but see this thing with
Full
tax,
legal
right?
fiscal
Now, Sweden, right? Do you know what the income tax rate is in Sweden?
50%.
27.
It's not as high as they say it is.
It's 27%.
But their VAT's
No. The whole point is, but their average, we pay, was it 20 pence, 20%? Is it 20 pence in a pound?
22.
Yeah, right. And your average wage is 25.
Well, all right. Well, what's your
Average
point?
wage in Sweden is 41.
Right.
So 27% of 41
Yeah.
gives you a big tax.
And that's-
The whole idea is educated people in and people earning
Yeah,
high
sure.
That's the
wages.
thesis of the Jimmy Reed Foundation.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
But
It's,
that-
it's
well,
not
it's-
to do with
it-
taxing
it's-
higher, it's actually getting people into better jobs.
Yeah.
That's how you
it's
do
the
it.
SNP.
And it's a
quality jobs for
But
everybody.
Yeah, but
it's
you-
culture as well. You've got to have generally the support of the people for a higher tax.
Our biggest problem for getting independence is going to be the bad blood between the two socialist parties, between the SNP and Labour. If they
Sorry?
can't sit down.
Two? What price you
Yeah,
say?
I did go.
No, I don't.
Social Democratic
Funny enough, I don't
Party.
actually.
On a
think-
good day.
I don't think that's true, Norrie, because
No.
in a post-independence vote,
There'll be a
situation,
realignment.
There'll be definitely be a realignment, and what I would actually suggest to you is that Jim Siller saying what he said last night,
Spot on.
or whatever. Well, it might be spot on.
No,
but
sorry,
there's
he
a lot.
ended well.
There's a lot of people who don't want the sort of socialist Scotland that he's suggesting, which is why, in my opinion, the Jimmy Reed Foundation have said, look, the solution isn't to go and tax everybody more to produce a better society. The solution's got to be an alternative to that. But that's the trickiest thing to articulate. So the Labour Party say the SNP, the one thing they can focus on is your lowering corporation tax, and therefore you are pro industry, you're neoliberal, you and the suggestion that the Labour Party in power in London is going to do something better than that is spurious. But the fact is, what they'll point at is that, and the other report, Poulters was talking about all this week. I mean, the problem with that is
That's
that's,
Wesley useless. Have you read it?
Well, the SSHA.
That's the
Scottish
same
Social
question
Studies.
72 different ways.
I know, but what it does tell you is that
Confusion reigns.
Well, it did tell you that there were a lot of people out there who expected taxes to go up, and that frightens the horses.
Look, can we
Could I just have?
can we talk about the performances in school? But you can talk a bit more about each.
But could I just
the
say
leader,
one
right?
tiny bit about what you said about the corporation tax? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they drop the corporation tax in independent Scotland by 3%, it's irrelevant. They will probably take in more money because they will probably set up a tax structure that actually collects it. Whereas in the UK, they don't. HMRC will admit to something like £30 billion a year, which they don't get. But when you look at other sources, it's about 120.
Okay.
When you get these giant
I
multinationals
bet you didn't.
paid a few million
But you didn't
or
notice
nothing.
that in the news yesterday, apparently 20 years ago, the Met, there was a report came out which basically said the Met, HMRC and the politicians were all completely corrupt in London.
Well, of course, they always have been.
I know that there was a report and it's been kind of buried for a long time.
Yeah.
Going back to the 70s scandals in the Met, the Met's always
That's
been
right. Right. What's the tax office as well?
It's always been a rat's nest.
Alex, scores on the doors.
Aye. Let's move on to the scores.
I'll give Alex 8. I think. I thought he was pretty competent, and he gave a few slaps where they were deserved. So that's fair enough. I'm torn about John Lamont in the respect that I agree with your point that several of you said that what she was attacking him on complete bullshit, but I suspect it resonates with the public.
She achieved what she set out to achieve, which was trying to attack Salmon personally.
Yeah, and because a Freedom of Information Act question wasn't answered, she could continue to attack him. Although I have to say, as Phil is always pointing out, even on a fourth go, on exactly the same subject, you would think by that time she'd be able to do it off the cuff. She was still reading off a script. So, okay, I'll give it 4. Well, you know, personal attacks is what questions at times like this is about, I think, for a lot of people. But anyway, Ruth Davidson on College Places, it's a hoary old subject. Again, I actually think you'd attacked him a bit harder for what they were doing in England. So it was pretty weak, because it's been done umpteen times, and I think he answered it better this time than he has in the past. But I do think the Scottish Government hasn't properly presented the case on this. But anyway, I'll give Ruth, give her 3. I don't think it was worth more than that. Willie Rennie, I'll give him 5, because I think it's a good question. Maybe there are some decent answers to it, but I think for the average punter in the street, a 4-fold increase in stop and search is very reminiscent of, you know, black folk being stopped in London and riots ensuing from it. So I give him 5 for that. Presiding officer was, okay. I think give her 6. About it.
Oh, Alec, I'll give 5. Not 5, 8. 8. Sorry, 8. Yeah, because he was confident.
You numerically challenged.
No, because you'll see in a minute why I've got this 5, because it's really
Labour Party.
No. This 5 is going to be rather traumatic. I'm going to give, right? Because of what I've said in the past days. Joanne 2. She was. Oh no, because she wasn't just attacking a personal attack on Alex Salmond. She was attacking the First Minister and the Scottish Government, going to and representing in Scotland, and it was appalling. And she's really lucky to get 2. It's only party loyalty that makes me give her 2. And just to rub it into her, I'll give Ruth 2, which I wouldn't normally do anyway. So she did a not bad job of presenting.
No comment about the women's bus this week.
No, but this is a traumatic, because I didn't say anything about it. He did. It's traumatic because I've always wondered what he's for. But I thought Willie's was the most intelligent and well thought out question. So I'm going to give Willie 5.
Ooh.
And I'll give the presiding officer 5 as well.
Alex, yes, I have to go with the 8. He was good, but could have been better. And he really got his points in. Jola. No, I think it was, again, she oversteps decorum, we should say. She goes too far quite often, especially personal attacks like that. And I entirely agree with what Phil had to say. She wasn't just attacking Alex Salmond, she was attacking the First Minister of Scotland in a very important role, representing the country abroad in front of a huge audience. So
successfully.
And in any case, Salmond was able to come up with a wonderful line, ridiculous frippery, which you can guarantee will be in the sketches about the FMQs tomorrow in the papers. Ruth, I think...
What are you giving her?
No, Jola. 1. That was really bad, because you've got to punish her for shocking. I mean, it was really unethical. Convention, that was the word I was looking for rather than decorum. You know, the conventions of what you can and can't say in Parliament, and when she overstepped the mark. Ruth.
David Cameron.
Ruth. She made her point, because I suspect Cochrane in the Daily Telegraph will quote her saying that 80,000 women or 60,000 women have disappeared from colleges in Scotland. 80,000. That'll appear in the Daily Telegraph. So in that sense, she's got her score in. But apart from that, she got hammered. So I'm going to give her 3. That leaves Willie. I have to agree. I think Willie he's sticking to his liberal with a small L, not neoliberal principles, which is that the centralisation of authority is a bad thing. Here's an example, perhaps, of centralisation of authority, but it's certainly we have 4 times as many stop and search, and if you've been aware of London politics for a long time, you'd know that's quite fiery. there's potential for riots and all the rest of it.
But I would say, just by because it's worth making the point here, the Liberal Party, and I don't think Alex exploited this, the Liberal Party are voting with several things with the government on gagging, on lobbying, which actually goes totally against the basic thesis. See, Willie Rennie stands up in Parliament in Holyrood and basically talks as though he exists in a liberal vacuum that's got nothing to do with the people down the road. And when he does that, he could get it right in the neck from
Fair enough.
You're not suggesting he's a
However, I'm going to give him.
shite, are you?
I'm going to give him 5. I'm going to give him 5.
Yeah, I mean, I give him 6, so I agree with that.
Who's left? Just the lady over there. She was,
It was a bit roisterous
Nothing to
today,
do.
wasn't it? It was a bit.
Yeah, she did all
just
right.
give her 5 because there was nothing for her to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it the other way around. Joanne, I kind of, you've got me thinking it. You're right. Her questions are too small. She's the leader of the main opposition party. It should be policy she attacks, not one man's.
It's standing in the Kergate having a gossip kind of questions.
Yeah. And I'm sorry,
Did you see
my
that one?
parliament
Tabloid
in
press.
Edinburgh needs somebody better than
Cheap
that
and
in
nasty.
opposition.
That's good.
So I'm going to give her a 2. Alex, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes he didn't look like he was winning, but when he came to his last input, he did slap everybody down. He won hands down today. Kind of didn't feel like it at times, but he definitely walked away the winner. So I'm going to give him an 8. Willie, yes and no. I mean, it's liberal hypocrisy, as Stuart says.
Yeah.
Good question, but once you sort of look at it, I mean, your point that what goes in the papers
Yeah.
is what it's all about, yeah. But for me, as an Anorak, no. I'm only going to give him a 3. Ruth! Oh, God, I'm really glad I'm not leaving the Conservative Party in Holyrood. No, I'm sorry, it was contrived, totally contrived. I don't know who she's aiming for.
Women.
Well, why? They're not going to vote Tory.
No, I know, but there's a weakness in women in the yes vote, so let's have a go at the
Oh,
Parliament.
yeah.
That's all it's about.
Yeah,
nothing else.
it was nonsense. Anybody that actually knows about it, it's one of the reasons that the Labour Party shut up about it, is because the stats support the college system being improved. So,
As in ours, you know.
I mean,
there's
you
a
could
lot
say
more-
Alec did explain it quite well.
well, that's, I mean,
FTE it's called.
he's
Full-time equivalent.
He's obviously been waiting for the opportunity because he did have it.
It's taken a long time to get to it.
And
Yeah.
it looks like he conveniently extracted 62,000 women back to work this
I've
year.
seen Mike
From
Russell being
yesterday's
interviewed on this
stats.
and not answering it properly.
Oh, I don't like Mark Russell at all.
That doesn't matter. All I'm saying to
Yeah,
you is I've seen him interviewed on Newsnight about this, and he doesn't articulate
No,
the strategy.
he doesn't come across as a
How
changer.
are we doing on the scores, though?
Well, I'm going to give Ruth a 2. So, the winner this week, strangely enough, was Alex on 32. Second, the presiding officer on 21, and she didn't do anything. So maybe there's a wee message there. Just sit down and
Then
shut
really-
up and you'll
No,
score.
basically you'll get an average score.
Willie on 18. So Willie came second out of the politicians.
All right.
Ruth on 10, she beat Joanne.
Yeah, Joanne was just worse than pathetic today. It's just beneath contempt that the shadow First Minister.
The Daily Record will put it on the front page.
Well, she got off lightly. She's quoting the Telegraph. She's saying the city-state of London is...
No.
Well, she basically said the city-state of London is head of the country.
Yeah, no, she got off lightly. He should have
Very,
made much
very
more of
light.
that.
Yeah.
He should have
Very
made much
light.
more.
But then you see, then he's not as cheap as she is.
No, that's not cheap. That is saying to Labour voters, your leadership is siding with the people you dislike most, and you've got to get the boot in.
Well, I'm hoping he's putting keeping all this to be used into a nice dry ammunition bag. Because if he starts now, strategy would tell you to leave that for the last few months. And in the last few months, you're slamming double magazines and hit her from all sides.
Okay. I hope you're right. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for another interesting first review of First Minister's questions from Holyrood. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Goodbye.